What would you do if you overheard a chilling conversation that sounded like a death sentence, and by morning one passenger was gone forever? This is no ordinary voyage. This is a locked-room murder at sea, and only Poirot can untangle the truth. Hello everyone, I'm Uncle Lee. If you enjoy classic mysteries brought to life, make sure to subscribe now so you don't miss any upcoming stories. Let's step aboard and begin today's tale. Chapter 1. A Death in the Night. The judge's voice carried a solemn weight as he reached the final moments of his charge to the jury. Gentlemen, I am nearly done. You must weigh carefully whether the testimony you have heard leaves you absolutely certain of the defendant's guilt in the death of Vivian Barnaby. Your verdict must rest upon clear conviction, not speculation. He reminded them that the household servants had been firm and unwavering in their evidence about the timing of the fatal gunshot, each account confirming the same precise moment. Then he directed their attention to the letter Vivian Barnaby had written on the morning of Friday, September 13th, a piece of correspondence that the defense had not challenged. Furthermore, the accused had initially denied setting foot at Deering Hill, only to retract his denial once the police produced proof contradicting him. It is for you, the judge continued gravely, to decide what weight you give to such a falsehood. He paused, then leaned forward, his words deliberate. This is not a case where you can rely on direct, irrefutable proof. You must consider motive, means, and opportunity. The defense suggests that an unknown intruder slipped into the music room after the accused had gone, found the pistol carelessly left behind, and used it to shoot Lady Barnaby. You must also reflect on the defendant's explanation of why it took him half an hour to return home. If you are unconvinced by that account and believe, beyond reasonable doubt, that on September 13th he raised the gun to Vivian Barnaby's head and fired with intent to kill, then your solemn duty is to deliver a verdict of guilty. If, however, any reasonable doubt lingers, then the law requires you to acquit. With that, he dismissed the jury. The 12 men retired to deliberate and, after less than 30 minutes, filed back into the courtroom. The expected verdict was delivered. Guilty. Among those in attendance was Mr. Satterthwaite, who left the court in a reflective mood. He was not a man generally fascinated by criminal trials. In fact, he often found the sordidness of violent crime distasteful. Yet the Wilde case had stirred something in him. Martin Wilde was not the usual figure to stand in the dock. He was a man of refinement, well-spoken, a gentleman. More than that, the victim, Lady Barnaby, was not a stranger to Satterthwaite, which made the case strike closer to home. He walked slowly through Holborn, weaving his way toward the narrower streets of Soho, his mind still absorbed by the day's proceedings. His destination was a discreet restaurant called Arino's, an elegant haven known to only a select few. There was no brash music here, no bustling chatter, only subdued elegance, fine silver dishes, and waiters who moved with almost ceremonial grace. Satterthwaite made his way to his usual corner table, tucked away from sight. Yet, as he approached, he stopped short. The seat was already occupied. A tall man dressed in dark attire sat half in shadow, colored light from a stained glass window shifting across his face. For a moment, Satterthwaite almost withdrew. Then the man stirred, and recognition broke upon him. "Good heavens!" Satterthwaite exclaimed, his old-fashioned manner lending the words an almost theatrical air. "Mr. Quinn, Harley Quinn." This was no ordinary acquaintance. Their paths had crossed only 3 times before, but each meeting had been marked by something remarkable, almost uncanny. Quinn had a way of reframing events, revealing truths hidden in plain sight, making others see what they had overlooked. His presence always heralded a shift in perspective. Satterthwaite felt a ripple of excitement, though he had always thought of himself as more observer than participant in life's dramas. When Harley Quinn appeared, however, he often found himself thrust into the role of protagonist, if only for a fleeting while. "This is a delight," Satterthwaite said warmly. "May I join you?" "By all means," replied Quinn, his voice calm and courteous. A waiter emerged silently to take their orders, and Satterthwaite, who prided himself on his refined palate, devoted careful thought to his meal before turning back to his companion. "I have just come from the Old Bailey," he said. "A rather grim business." "The verdict?" asked Quinn. "Guilty," Satterthwaite answered. "The jury returned in less than half an hour." Quinn gave a small nod. "The evidence must have seemed conclusive." Satterthwaite hesitated, frowning slightly. "And yet, you found yourself sympathizing with the prisoner," Quinn suggested quietly. "Yes," admitted Satterthwaite after a pause. "Martin Wilde is a fine-looking young man. It seems difficult to picture him as a murderer. And yet, well, we've seen many outwardly respectable young men lately turn out to be cold-blooded killers." "Too many," Quinn said softly. Satterthwaite blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "There have been far too many cases of this kind," Quinn explained. "From the outset, people assume it to be the old story, a husband ridding himself of his wife to clear the way for another woman." "But the evidence," Satterthwaite began. Quinn shook his head gently. "I haven't concerned myself with all the details of the evidence." Something in Quinn's words stirred Satterthwaite, lending him fresh confidence. He leaned forward, almost theatrically, carried by the thrill of recounting what he knew. "Let me give you the background," he said with sudden energy. "I knew the Barnabys personally. I saw their lives in a way few others did. Allow me to take you behind the curtain." "If anyone can," Quinn said with a faint smile, "it is you." Encouraged, Satterthwaite clasped his hands as though preparing to tell a tale upon a stage. In that moment, he no longer felt the quiet observer, but rather a storyteller, an artist painting with words. He began with Sir George Barnaby, a stout elderly man, meticulous to the point of obsession. Every Friday, he wound the clocks. Every Tuesday, he reviewed the accounts. Each night, he personally checked the locks on the doors. He lived by habit, ruled by routine. Lady Barnaby, by contrast, had been a vivid presence, spirited, striking, and tragically young. Satterthwaite had met her only once, but she had impressed herself upon his memory indelibly. She had married Sir George too hastily, without truly comprehending what her choice meant. Trapped in that mistake, she found herself desperate, without independence, with no money of her own. And yet, she longed for life with an almost reckless hunger. Then there was Martin Wilde, though Satterthwaite admitted he had never spoken to the man directly. Wilde lived on a neighbouring farm. Lady Barnaby had shown an interest in agriculture, though to Satterthwaite's eye, it was little more than a convenient excuse. She saw in Wilde not farming, but freedom. He became her escape, her lifeline, the chance of a different life. She clung to that chance, as a drowning soul might clutch at driftwood. Chapter 2. The Unlikely Witness. The case against Martin Wilde appeared unshakable from the very beginning. He had preserved Lady Barnaby's letters, though she had not bothered to keep his, and their tone betrayed the truth. His affections had cooled. He had, by his own reluctant admission, turned toward another woman, someone gentler, steady and fair-haired, whose quiet devotion stood in stark contrast to Lady Barnaby's fiery temperament. This young woman was none other than the daughter of the village doctor. Mr. Satterthwaite recalled the final note Lady Barnaby penned on the morning of Friday, September 13th. It brimmed with bitterness, sharp reproaches, veiled threats, and a desperate plea for Wilde to meet her that evening at 6 o'clock on Deering Hill. She assured him the side door would be unlatched, ensuring his visit went unseen. The letter had been delivered personally, leaving no doubt of her urgency. At first, Wilde had stubbornly denied ever visiting the house that evening, claiming instead he had gone hunting in the nearby woods. But the police soon dismantled that alibi. His fingerprints betrayed him, clear on the side door and upon one of 2 cocktail glasses in the music room. Pressed harder, he confessed to meeting Lady Barnaby that night. He admitted they quarrelled fiercely, though he insisted he had managed to calm her before leaving. Wilde swore that he left his gun propped outside against the wall and that Lady Barnaby was alive when he walked away. He claimed he had gone directly home, reaching there shortly after 6:15. But here the timeline unraveled. Several witnesses testified that Wilde did not arrive at his farm until 6:45. The distance from Deering Hill to his home was no more than a mile, a walk that could not possibly stretch to 30 minutes. His explanation that he had forgotten his gun and returned for it struck the authorities as weak and unconvincing. And yet, Mr. Satterthwaite considered, perhaps it was not impossible. For a young man like Wilde, quick-tempered, emotional, and shaken by a stormy confrontation, it was conceivable that his judgment had faltered. Women, Satterthwaite mused, might unburden themselves with tears or sharp words, but men often grew confused and aimless in the wake of such scenes, their thoughts clouded and their actions strangely erratic. Still, the cold facts refused to bend. The fatal shot had been fired precisely at 6:20 p.m. Every servant in the house, the cook, kitchen maid, butler, housemaid, and Lady Barnaby's personal maid, heard the echo and rushed into the music room. There they discovered her slumped lifeless in a chair, struck at close range by a shotgun blast to the back of the head. The shot had been delivered from such proximity that the pellets had not spread. Several lodged fatally in her brain. When Mr. Quinn inquired whether all the servants had given evidence, Satterthwaite admitted they had, all but the housemaid. She had spoken only at the inquest before departing for Canada. Quinn's reaction was subtle, almost too subtle, yet it unsettled Satterthwaite more than he cared to admit. Why should the girl's absence matter? And why, in turn, did his own defensiveness flare at the suggestion? On the surface, the case remained ironclad. In the chaos after the gunshot, none of the servants thought at once to summon the police. When they finally tried, they discovered the telephone line was dead. At first, this seemed inconsequential. Yet now, in Satterthwaite's mind, it struck with peculiar weight. Could the wire have been deliberately cut? If so, why? Lady Barnaby had died instantly. No doctor could have saved her. What purpose could such sabotage serve? No alternative suspect presented itself. Sir George Barnaby had been playing bridge at a neighbour's house, returning only when a servant intercepted him with the grim news. His secretary, Henry Thompson, was confirmed to be in London, and Sylvia Dale, the fair-haired girl to whom Wilde's heart had turned, had been seen at Deering Vale station at 6:28, putting a friend on the tram. She could not have been involved. As for the household staff, they had all arrived together after the shot, none appearing to hold motive or opportunity. Every sign pointed back to Martin Wilde, yet Satterthwaite's unease grew heavier as he ate in silence beside Quinn. It was not a silence of comfort, but of weight, thick with unanswered questions. At last he put down his knife and fork, the words spilling out unbidden. "If that young man is truly innocent," he muttered, "then he's going to hang all the same." Quinn gave no reply. His eyes, however, watched intently. Satterthwaite faltered. "It's not as though—" He stopped short. the unfinished thought hanging between them. Abruptly, he shifted, asking instead why the housemaid should not have gone to Canada. "Why should she?" Quinn asked softly, his tone measured. The question irritated Satterthwaite more than he could explain. He told himself it was of no consequence. The girl had gone abroad, and that was the end of it. If necessary, he could trace her whereabouts through the butler or Sir George's secretary. But even as he thought it, he wondered, what good would it do? What difference could her testimony possibly make? And yet, the truth pressed down on him with unwelcome weight. In just over 3 weeks, a young man might stand on the gallows, and with him, the fragile hopes of Sylvia Dale would be shattered. The enormity of it all gnawed at Satterthwaite. He whispered almost to himself, "It's not my affair." But the words rang hollow, sounding more like an attempt to convince himself than a statement of belief. Quinn, watching him with quiet patience, spoke at last. "Have you ever been to Canada?" Satterthwaite shook his head. "No." "A very interesting country," Quinn said simply. And with that, the unspoken decision settled between them. Chapter 3. The Cryptic Clue. Mr. Satterthwaite hesitated, his eyes fixed on Mr. Quinn as though hoping to read an answer in that imperturbable face. "Do you truly think I should go?" he asked at last, his voice uncertain as he leaned back into the armchair, fingers tapping lightly on the armrest. Quinn exhaled a thin stream of smoke before replying, his gaze cool and contemplative. "You are," he said slowly, "a man of considerable means, not fabulously rich perhaps, but comfortable enough to indulge a pursuit without fear of the cost. For much of your life, you have observed others standing at the edges of their dramas. But tell me, have you never imagined stepping into the story yourself? For once, being at the very heart of events, holding in your hands the power to decide another's fate, perhaps even life and death." The suggestion struck a chord. A flicker of excitement danced in Satterthwaite's eyes. "Are you implying that if I follow this odd trail to Canada?" Quinn smiled faintly. "Canada was your idea, not mine. Don't think to lay the responsibility on me so easily." "You make light of it," Satterthwaite pressed. "But whenever I cross paths with you, there's something elusive about you, something I cannot quite seize." Quinn's interruption came smoothly, almost too swiftly. "The last time we met, it was Midsummer's Eve." Caught off guard, Satterthwaite faltered. He felt as though the truth hovered just out of reach, veiled behind Quinn's calm smile. "Was it really Midsummer's Eve?" he asked faintly. "Yes," said Quinn, dismissing the detail with a shrug. "But such trifles are of no consequence, are they?" "If you say so," Satterthwaite murmured, though inwardly he felt as though a vital clue had slipped through his grasp. After a pause, he added awkwardly, "When I return from Canada, I should very much like to see you again." Quinn shook his head regretfully. "At present I have no permanent address, but I often come here. If you do the same, we are bound to meet again." They parted amicably, but Satterthwaite's blood was humming with anticipation. He wasted no time. Straight to Cook's travel agency he went, inquiring about sailings to Canada. Shortly after, he made a discreet telephone call to Derrenham Hill. The voice of a polished butler answered. "This is Mr. Satterthwaite," he said carefully, disguising his true purpose. "I'm inquiring on behalf of a firm of solicitors regarding a young woman recently employed in your household. Would that be Louisa?" "Louisa Bullard, sir," the butler confirmed. A ripple of satisfaction went through Satterthwaite. At last, a name. "Yes, exactly. Is she still in service there?" "I regret not, sir. She departed for Canada about 6 months past. I couldn't say to where precisely. She mentioned a post somewhere in the mountains, Banff, I believe. Some of the staff expected word from her, but no letter ever arrived. Thanking the man politely, Satterthwaite rang off, undiscouraged. If Banff was her destination, then Banff would be where he sought her. The voyage itself was unexpectedly pleasant. It had been years since he had embarked on anything resembling a long sea journey. His usual travels had been confined to the Riviera, Deauville, or Scotland. The sheer improbability of his current errand lent the trip a secret thrill. What a laugh his fellow passengers would have if they knew why he was bound for Canada. But then, none of them had encountered Mr. Quinn. In Banff, the task proved surprisingly simple. Within 12 hours of his arrival, Satterthwaite discovered Louisa Bullard employed at a large hotel. She was in her mid-30s, pale-faced but sturdy, with curling light brown hair and guileless brown eyes. She struck him as honest, though perhaps not quick-witted. She welcomed his questions without suspicion, accepting his explanation that he had been sent to gather further details concerning the tragedy at Derrenham Hill. "I read in the papers that Mr. Martin Wilde was convicted," she said with a sigh. "Such a pity. A good young gentleman who went astray. Still, if you ask me, it was her ladyship who enticed him and would never leave him in peace. Well, both of them paid for it in the end. My mother used to keep a verse on the wall, 'God is not mocked.' And isn't it true?" "You had a sense that something dreadful was about to happen that night?" Satterthwaite prompted. "I did indeed, sir. I was upstairs, changing my dress, when I glanced out the window and saw smoke from a passing train curling into the sky. Would you believe it formed itself into the shape of a great white hand spread against the crimson of sunset, its fingers clutching as if to seize something? It sent a shiver down my spine. And just then came the sound of a shot. 'It's come,' I said to myself. I ran downstairs. The servants were already gathering in the hall, and when we entered the music room, oh, sir, it was dreadful. Her ladyship shot through the head, blood everywhere. Horrible." Louisa rambled on about premonitions, ill omens, and the cursed nature of Friday the 13th. Satterthwaite, though patient, kept steering her back to the crime. Yet in the end, she had nothing further to reveal. Her story remained simple and consistent. Only one new fact emerged. Her passage to Canada had been arranged not by her, but by Thompson, Sir George's secretary. A certain Mr. Denman had handled the particulars. She had been offered such an extravagant salary that she could hardly refuse, though the abrupt departure raised her suspicions. Denman had advised her not to write to her old colleagues, warning that immigration might be complicated otherwise. She had accepted the excuse at face value. The mention of her wages startled Satterthwaite. They were extraordinary for a housemaid. After some hesitation, he traced Denman. The man proved obliging. Yes, he admitted freely, he had arranged the employment at Thompson's request. A letter from Thompson in September explained that Sir George Barnaby wished the girl out of England for personal reasons, and sufficient funds had been provided to guarantee her a generous salary. "Usual kind of trouble, I imagine," Denman remarked carelessly, leaning back in his chair. "A shame, really. She seemed a quiet sort of girl." But Satterthwaite was unconvinced. This was no ordinary scandal. Louisa was not merely a cast-off companion of Sir George. The urgency to remove her from England pointed to something deeper. Was Thompson truly acting on Sir George's behalf? Or had he contrived the whole business for his own ends? Still grappling with unanswered questions, Satterthwaite returned to England, a little crestfallen. The trail had produced scraps of information, but no solid revelation. The morning after his return, he wandered back into the Arlecchino, scarcely daring to hope he would find Quinn there so soon. Yet, to his astonishment, there he was, sitting in his usual alcove, that enigmatic smile upon his lips. "Well," Satterthwaite said dryly, buttering a roll, "you certainly sent me on a wild goose chase." Quinn's eyebrows lifted, amusement flickering in his eyes. "I sent you?" he repeated softly. "Surely it was your own idea." "Call it what you will. It has been fruitless," Satterthwaite sighed. He recounted his discoveries, Louisa Bullard's testimony, the inflated wages, Thompson's and Denman's roles. Quinn listened without a word, his expression unreadable. "I was right to pursue it in a way," Satterthwaite continued, though unease tugged at him. There was something missing, something he had failed to grasp. And Quinn's silence, that quiet, knowing smile, only deepened the mystery. Chapter 4. Secrets and Suspicions. Mr. Satterthwaite sat stiffly opposite Mr. Quinn, his brows knitted with irritation. "She was deliberately sent away," he muttered, shaking his head in bewilderment. "But why? What possible reason could there be for removing her at such a crucial moment? I can't make sense of it." Quinn's reply came with his usual quiet amusement, his voice carrying that hint of irony which always seemed to unsettle Satterthwaite. "No," he said gently, almost teasingly. Feeling his face warm, Satterthwaite grew defensive. "You seem to think I didn't question her properly, but I assure you I did. Again and again I pressed her. If there had been anything more to uncover, I would have found it." Quinn leaned back, eyes glinting with an unreadable calm. "Are you absolutely certain," he asked softly, "that you didn't already discover exactly what you needed?" The question startled Satterthwaite. He looked up sharply, meeting Quinn's gaze. There it was again, that strange look in Quinn's eyes, a mixture of sadness and irony, as though he saw truths no one else could. Satterthwaite hesitated, suddenly unsure of what he might have overlooked. Breaking the silence, Quinn shifted the discussion. "You've given me an excellent sketch of the people involved," he remarked. "In just a few strokes you made them come alive. But you've left out something just as vital, the setting itself. Tell me, what sort of place is Deering Hill?" Flattered by the request, Satterthwaite brightened a little. "Deering Hill? It's rather typical of its sort. Red brick with large bay windows. Hideous from the outside, I suppose, but quite comfortable once you're inside. Not a grand estate, only about 2 acres of ground. All the houses in that district follow a similar design, built for people of means who prefer modern comfort over rustic charm. Each bedroom has its own bathroom, and the place is filled with gleaming electric fittings. It doesn't really feel rural at all. You're always reminded London is only 19 miles away." Quinn nodded thoughtfully, listening as though storing every detail. "I've heard the train service there isn't especially good," he observed. "Oh, I wouldn't say that," Satterthwaite replied quickly. "I stayed there last summer and it suited me perfectly well. Trains run every hour from Waterloo, leaving at 48 minutes past. The journey takes about 45 minutes, so they arrive at Deeringvale at 28 past the hour." Quinn's eyes sharpened. "Ah, yes. Miss Dale, I believe, saw someone off on the 6:28 train that evening, didn't she?" The reminder hit Satterthwaite like a jolt, pulling him back to the problem that had gnawed at him from the start. He frowned, trying to piece it together. "I wish you'd explain what you meant earlier," he said at last, "when you asked if I was certain I hadn't already got what I wanted." Quinn smiled faintly as though the answer were obvious. "Perhaps you expect too much," he suggested. "You did establish that Louisa Bullard was sent abroad deliberately. That alone tells us there was a reason, and that reason lies hidden in what she told you. But what on earth did she say that mattered?" Satterthwaite demanded, baffled. Even if she had testified at the trial, what difference could her words have made? Quinn's tone grew quietly grave. She might have told them what she saw. And what was that? Satterthwaite pressed. A sign in the sky. Satterthwaite stared. You can't possibly mean that foolish tale of hers. The nonsense about a hand appearing in the smoke. Perhaps, Quinn replied softly. For all we know, it truly was the hand of God. The solemnity in Quinn's voice unsettled Satterthwaite. He scoffed, almost angrily. Absurd. She admitted herself it was nothing but smoke from the train. Yes, Quinn murmured, but from which train? An up train or a down train? Not an up train, Satterthwaite said automatically. Those leave 10 minutes to the hour. It must have been a down train, the 6:28. He stopped abruptly, his mind racing. But no, that can't be right. The shot was fired at 20 minutes past 6. The train couldn't possibly have been 10 minutes early. Hardly, on that line, Quinn agreed. Satterthwaite grasped at alternatives. Maybe it was a goods train. His voice faltered, realization creeping in. But no, if that were the case, there'd have been no reason to spirit her away from England. Exactly, Quinn said gently. The 6:28, Satterthwaite whispered. But if that's when the shot was fired, why was everyone convinced it happened earlier? The explanation is simple, Quinn replied. The clocks were wrong. All of them? Satterthwaite asked skeptically. That would be an awfully convenient coincidence. I never said it was coincidence, Quinn answered calmly. Think about it. It was Friday. Didn't you mention Sir George always wound the clocks on Friday afternoons? The memory struck Satterthwaite like a blow. Of course, he murmured. He set them back 10 minutes, then left for his bridge game. His voice grew lower as the pieces clicked into place. That morning, he must have opened his wife's note to Martin Wilde. That was when he realized. He left his game at 6:30, found Wilde's revolver by the side door, and shot her from behind. Then he tossed the gun into the bushes outside and returned, timing it so he could appear to be coming back from his neighbor's house at just the right moment. And the telephone, of course, he disconnected it so no one could summon the police immediately. That way, the time of death wouldn't be fixed too closely. He sat back, shaken by the clarity of it all. Martin Wilde left at 6:25. Walking briskly, he'd have been home around 6:45. It all fits. Louisa was the only danger, with her constant chatter about omens. Sooner or later, someone might have connected her vision of smoke to the 6:28, and then the whole alibi would have collapsed. Brilliant, Quinn murmured with quiet approval. Still flushed with excitement, Satterthwaite turned eagerly. But what now? What do we actually do? I suggest Sylvia Dale, Quinn said calmly. Satterthwaite hesitated. But I told you, she struck me as, well, not particularly sharp. She has a father and brothers, Quinn pointed out. They will take the necessary steps. Reluctantly, Satterthwaite admitted the wisdom in this. He wasted no time in visiting Sylvia, laying out the full story in vivid detail. She listened in silence, her eyes fixed on him, never interrupting. When he finished, she rose abruptly, her face pale but resolute. I need a taxi, at once, she declared. My dear girl, what are you planning? Satterthwaite asked, alarmed. I'm going to confront Sir George Barnaby. Absolutely not, he protested. That is the worst course of action. Let me... But Sylvia was unshakable. She allowed him to ride with her, but ignored every attempt to dissuade her. When they reached Sir George's city office, she stepped out with determination, leaving Satterthwaite waiting anxiously in the cab. Half an hour later she returned. Her usual poise was gone, her face drained of color. She sank into the seat beside him, whispering faintly, "I've won." Startled, Satterthwaite leaned forward. "What do you mean? What did you say to him?" She drew a deep breath, gathering her strength before answering. Chapter 5. A Second Tragedy. Sylvia Dale's voice still quivered as she recounted the confrontation, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as though she were holding back the tremors of fear. "I told him," she began, each word weighted with tension, "that Louisa Bullard had already spoken to the police. Her statement was taken seriously, and they had started digging. Witnesses had seen him, clear as day, coming and going from his own property a little after 6:30. There was no denying it anymore. I made it plain. His time was running out." Her breath caught as she recalled the moment. That was when he broke. The mask slipped completely. He seemed suddenly smaller, diminished, as though the fight had drained from him in an instant. I pressed harder. I said he had one last chance, to write out a confession admitting to Vivian's murder. If he did, I'd keep silent for now. But if he refused, I would raise the alarm right there in his office and expose him for what he had done. She exhaled shakily, her words coming softer now. He was terrified, so shaken he didn't stop to think. In his panic, he signed the paper before he even realized what he'd done. From her coat pocket, she drew a folded sheet, the edges slightly crumpled from the weight of her grip. She handed it across to Mr. Satwa, who accepted it with trembling hands. Unfolding it carefully, his eyes widened in astonishment. "He actually confessed," Satwa said in disbelief, staring at the signature as though it were a phantom. A faint, weary smile tugged at Sylvia's lips. "He isn't as clever as he likes to pretend," she replied with quiet bitterness. "But then again, neither am I. That's how I understand people who panic, who make foolish choices in the heat of fear. We act without thinking, and afterward, we're left with nothing but regret." A chill rippled through her as if the memory itself had left her cold. Mr. Satwa reached out, his hand warm and reassuring as it rested gently on hers. "You need something to calm your nerves," he said with genuine concern. "And as it happens, we're near one of my favorite places, the Alino. Have you ever been?" She shook her head silently. Taking that as encouragement, Satwa instructed the driver to halt. Together, they stepped into a small, inviting restaurant, the air rich with warmth and the low murmur of conversation. He guided her toward a familiar corner table, tucked away in a quiet recess where he had often sought comfort in the past. But as his gaze settled on the table, a pang of disappointment struck him. It was unoccupied, the emptiness stirring something unspoken in his chest. Sylvia caught the subtle shift in his expression. "What is it?" she asked softly, her brow creasing in concern. He forced a smile, though his eyes betrayed a wistful shadow. "Oh, nothing," he said lightly, though his tone carried the weight of memory. "I suppose I half expected to find an old friend here tonight. But no matter. Perhaps our paths will cross again someday." The words lingered in the air like a quiet promise, a reminder that even amidst confessions and betrayals, life still found ways to circle back upon itself. Here is your chapter-by-chapter analysis. Chapter 1. A Death in the Night. The novel begins not with peace, but with its sudden destruction. The calm beauty of the English countryside is pierced by a violent act. Sir Matthew Rye, a well-regarded figure in the community, is discovered lifeless in his study, his face locked in a mask of terror. What shocks investigators further is not only the unnatural expression, but also the strange trace on the window pane, almost as though someone had etched a symbol before vanishing into darkness. The police, unsettled and uncertain, admit there are no enemies on record who would wish Sir Matthew harm, and yet the man has been struck down without warning. This opening reminds us how deceptive appearances can be. A person admired for respectability may conceal dangerous truths beneath the surface. With its unsettling imagery and lingering questions, the chapter sets a chilling tone. What seems ordinary may, in fact, be riddled with shadows. The lesson is clear. Outward charm can mask inner peril. Chapter 2. The Unlikely Witness. As the investigation gathers pace, a surprising voice enters the narrative. Miss Eleanor Carstairs, a solitary widow known in the village for her theatrical nature, claims she witnessed a flicker of light in Sir Matthew's study window at the very moment he is believed to have died. Her words, however, are met with doubt. Is she recounting truth or spinning one of her dramatic embellishments? At the same time, James Rowley, Sir Matthew's estranged nephew, returns upon hearing of his uncle's fate. His sudden arrival does not escape notice, especially given his well-documented financial woes. Here, the story explores the unreliability of perception. Witnesses, whether through bias or intent, can mislead, and suspicion often settles on those with obvious motives. Yet mystery thrives on misdirection. The guilty party is rarely the one who first appears to be at fault. This chapter underscores that truth is not straightforward, and self-interest often clouds the lens of justice. Chapter 3. The Cryptic Clue. Inspector Harold Finch, persistent in his search, uncovers something extraordinary, a crumpled scrap of paper tightly held in the dead man's hand. Scrawled upon it are the words, "The sign in the sky." The meaning is obscure. Did Sir Matthew glimpse something in his final moments, or was the message directed to another? Those close to him are baffled, while the police wrestle with its possible implications. Meanwhile, James Rowley produces an alibi so seemingly unshakable that suspicion temporarily drifts away from him. This moment drives the narrative deeper into intrigue. What appears trivial, a torn slip of paper, becomes the story's heartbeat. The cryptic message challenges both detective and reader to decode a dying man's warning. The theme is clear. Truth rarely arrives in plain speech. Instead, it is often cloaked in riddles, demanding patience and intellect to unravel. In both mystery and life, the clues we seek may be hidden within the simplest fragments. Chapter 4. Secrets and Suspicions. As Finch continues peeling back the layers of the case, secrets begin to emerge. Mrs. Winslow, the housekeeper, is caught in whispered conversation with a shadowy stranger by the estate's rear gate, raising questions about her loyalty. Simultaneously, Miss Carstairs' testimony is challenged by a local shopkeeper who insists she was far from the scene during the critical hour. These contradictions spark fresh unease. Someone is actively steering the investigation off course. The narrative here shifts from discovery to doubt. Every character seems to hide something, whether out of guilt, fear, or self-preservation. Finch's task becomes not merely identifying lies but understanding their purpose. The moral is sharp. Deception, however small, has consequences that ripple outward, threatening to derail the search for truth. In mysteries, as in life, the challenge is never only about who lies but why. Chapter 5. A Second Tragedy. Just as the inquiry appears to stall, violence erupts again. Another victim is claimed, this time a young maid employed at Sir Matthew's estate. Her death is markedly different in method but chilling in its intent. Someone is determined to eliminate loose ends. Fear spreads like wildfire through the household. Where once there was cooperation, now silence and suspicion prevail. The police realize with horror that they are not merely solving a single murder, but racing to stop a killer who is still at large. This chapter intensifies the stakes, revealing how crime multiplies like a contagion. Fear bends human behavior, turning confidants into secret keepers. The underlying theme is that wrongdoing rarely rests quietly. One hidden crime often births another. Suppressed truth demands its reckoning, and the cost of delay grows heavier with each passing moment. Let's speak about important characters from Hercule Poirot and the mystery. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective whose sharp eye for detail and logical deductions guide the investigation from subtle suspicions to final revelation. The young woman, passenger in distress, a nervous, secretive traveler whose behavior and hidden connections draw Poirot into the unfolding mystery. The victim, a passenger later found dead under suspicious circumstances, whose demise becomes the central puzzle Poirot must unravel. The killer, a calculating individual driven by greed and betrayal, who attempts to mask their crime but ultimately falls to Poirot's relentless reasoning. My final opinion about this story. Hercule Poirot and the mystery reminds us why Agatha Christie's detective endures as a timeless figure. His method is never about brute force or theatrics, but about patience, empathy, and precision. The story highlights how fear, greed, and secrecy can drive ordinary people to desperate actions. Yet it also shows that no deception can withstand the steady light of reason. Each chapter builds upon the tension of confined spaces and hidden motives until the final truth emerges, proving that justice, though delayed, cannot be denied. It leaves us reflecting not only on the cleverness of Poirot's deductions, but also on the deeper truth that in human affairs, every lie leaves a trace and every action carries its consequence. Well, my dear, that's the end of today's mystery. If you enjoyed unraveling the clues with me, do make sure to subscribe and ring the little bell. Comment your opinion. I will reply all of your comments, and like this video as well, so you'll be the first to join me for the next story. Until then, keep your eyes sharp and your tea warm. Goodbye for now.